I want to talk about revival for a minute. I wonder what revival, when I say that word, what comes up for you? If you have faith history, Christian history, if you have some Pentecostal history, that could mean like, great. If I said, we're going to have revival meetings, and you're like, oh no, are you serious? That means you come to the church every night until I say no more. Revival meetings, some of you, it could mean something to an extreme level of Pentecostalism, even to say that, because I consider myself Pentecostal, but that's interpreted many ways, probably even in this room. But it may mean something weird to you, something strange that's happened. It might elicit a lot of emotion, and you express it that way, like it was just an emotional thing. But some of you also have the experience when we see great revivals in our history, and even today, really the truth is it's when a lot of people come to Jesus, just to say it simply, all right? The definition, this slide says the definition of revival, at least how I want to kind of engage in a little bit today. It means this: to live again. Might mean to recover from something. A lot of times you'll see the word awakening, that it awakens something in us. It rekindles something. And I like these biblical definitions of it. It's a shoot up out of the ground again. It's this sprouting afresh. Like something's there, but you couldn't see it. Maybe, like in our story, you thought it was dead and gone, and it shoots out, it sprouts out. And the belief is it can grow into something great. It's to reignite a fire. A lot of times revival has something to do with fire and flames too, so maybe that is something you think of. And I'm not trying to have a revival meeting today by any means, because it's not something that we elicit and we do. God does the reviving. So we need to establish that right out of the great gate. But I do believe that we could say that our world, our culture, our nation, our city, my life, our church needs a revival. Those words in every form we need. I wonder today where you need revival. Is there something that you need revived? I have said this type of phrase before. It's not because God has told me something. It is because statistics would say that in this room right now, somebody's marriage needs reviving. Just statistics. Doesn't matter if you go to church or not. You may think it's dead, and on the outward it looks dead. It needs reviving. If it's going to survive, God needs to step in and do something. But could I even, I'll get to this later, so it's me talking, so, I'm throwing things out there all the time. I will say this, it's not in the notes necessarily, but I will say, let's go marriage. I truly believe that a lot of times the revival needs to happen in the individual that is crying out for revival more than the revival of our marriage. Meaning, God is trying to start with you today. It's not, I wish it was like it was before. Maybe there's some truth in that. I don't know your story. But maybe the place that God needs to get, the person that needs to be revived starts with you, not the both of you. I want the both of you. I pray for that. Don't get me wrong. But God needs to do that in you first, your own heart. It's even with the church. It's, yes, all of us may need reviving in some form. Our city needs it. Our nation needs it. We remember a tragedy that it's shocking to believe 20 plus years ago. All these things, yes, we need that. But maybe it needs to start in the individual person. Seems like it does that often. We'll see it in the family today that we look at. This is 5 chapters. Praise God, I'm not reading them all to you, even though I want to so desperately. It is my greatest struggle. I could do this for hours, but most of you would walk out, grab a box of donuts, and go home. But let me start with the end. 42 to 46 is the chapters. Revival happens, And in this revival, it's really all of the family, Jacob, the dad, Joseph, one of the favorite sons who they thought was dead, and all the brothers, all the boys, and maybe even you could say in that nation at that time. But if we jump to the end of the story, Genesis 45, verses 27 and 28, but when they reported, I think I messed that up, to Jacob, everything that Joseph had told them. This is the end. Joseph, his favorite son, Jacob, the dad, Jacob thought he was dead, gone, saw the bloody cloak, the robe, thought his boy was dead. And now 20 plus years later, the brothers come and say he's alive. And when he saw the wagons that Joseph sent to carry him, here it is, his spirit revived. Then Jacob exclaimed, "It must be true. My son Joseph, he's alive." And then this motivates him to say, "I must go and see him before I die." If you jump now to the very end, he sees Joseph for the first time. This is in chapter 46 that we read these verses. You can go to the next slide. Joseph prepared his chariot. He traveled to Goshen to meet his father Jacob. When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father. And he wept. And he held on to him for a long time. And Jacob said to Joseph, I thought this was key, a picture of revival when it really happens. Now, I'm ready to die. Why? Because I've seen your face. And I know you are still alive. Even now, where do you need revival today? And maybe is this question, this is the question I want to ask you, is are you ready to die? And that's a pretty heavy thing to start off with. It's where we'll wrap up to, but like this idea that I have peace now, the word would be shalom in my life. I'm ready to die because I'm revived. Revival has happened for me, and it's spilled into my family. And we see that. Where do you need to be revived? What needs revival in you? Who needs it around you? In Genesis 42 through 46, I'm going to read a little bit and tell a lot of it, but it's been 22, 23 years since all of the stuff that we've been looking at has taken place, since Joseph had those original dreams that drove his brothers to hate him, sell him into slavery, and pretend to the father, Jacob, that he was dead. It's now been 22, 23 years. They don't know what's happened. No contact has been made. We saw a few weeks ago the whole experience that Judah, one of the brothers, was having down with the Canaanites, living that life. And the famine is at its full force. Brent brought that up last week. This famine began, and Joseph has now risen to the height that he is in. And so Genesis 42 kicks off, and it's like he's just fully into it. It's at part of its worst. And Genesis 42, 1 through 2 says, when Jacob heard, Dad heard that grain was available in Egypt, all that Joseph was setting up, he said to his sons, this is interesting, concerning needing revival and what we do when we're like not ready, don't know what to do. He says to the boys, they've been around for 20 years. They're still just living in that same spot. They've not really moved much. Why are you standing around looking at one another? What are you doing? You just keep talking about it and looking at each other. Why aren't you doing something? We're in the midst of a famine, and there's a lot of stuff you could apply to this for our time today, for our own selves, maybe your experience. I've heard there is grain in Egypt, so stop looking at each other. go down there and buy enough food to keep us alive. Otherwise, we're going to die. They're desperate. So they go. The brothers go without Benjamin. He will not let the younger brother go. Remember, he has 2 sons from his favorite wife, Rachel, Benjamin and Joseph. One he believes is dead. Benjamin, the youngest, he will not let him go. I'm not going to lose my 2 sons. And they get there. And they don't realize it's Joseph. Joseph is now the governor of Egypt, and he's taking care of the food program. He is the big boss there. And they go down, and here is one of those first places where you see the dream that he had when he's 17, and he doesn't fully grasp it at the moment. But all of a sudden, he sees, bowing down before him to get grain and buy it from Egypt, he sees his brothers. He recognizes them, and then he remembers his dreams. They don't recognize him. And then, why he does this, we're not totally clear. He maybe tests them. Maybe he's still struggling with forgiveness. He's still trying to work it out. He's still being, we'll talk about this in a bit, sanctified. But he tells them, you're spies. He knows who they are. They don't know who he is. He accuses them of being spies. You're coming here to see our vulnerabilities, to wreak havoc on our community. And he says, they're like, no, man, that's not why we're here. We're here to buy food. And they try to explain themselves. And he says, well, here's what I'll do. I'll test you. You said you have a younger brother. You buy food, you go home, and you bring him back. He puts them in jail for 3 days, prison. And he says, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go get your younger brother. I'm keeping one of your brothers here until you bring your younger brother back. And while they're in prison and while they're talking about it, he hears them. It breaks his heart. But they're talking about, man, God must be punishing us. This is why this is happening. 22 years ago, we sold our brother into slavery. They still don't fully grasp it. They don't get it. He hears them speaking that way, and it breaks his heart. He keeps Simeon, one of the brothers, in jail, and they go home. He gives them, Joseph does their food. He gives them their money back. They even get about a days down the road, and they open their packs, and they are freaking out and terrified because they see all their money back in there, and they can't believe it, and they're just continuing to say, God is punishing us. We're paying for what we did. They go back and they tell dad, they get home, we got the food, but man, our money was back in the packs. Now it looks like we stole from the governor from Egypt. And the governor told us, if we come back and get food, we better have our younger brother. And he kept Simeon. He's in prison. And the dad's freaking out. Jacob's like, I can't believe this. Everything is going against me. Everything is falling apart. And he won't send to Benjamin. Ain't happening. I'm not losing a second son. But desperation sets in again. It's interesting to me that sometimes we become, and I've experienced this myself, I thought I was at my lowest, my most desperate. And I realized that maybe I wasn't really there, that God still had work to do. And for them, desperation sets in again. The famine continues and it gets worse. They need more food. But the brothers remind dad, hey, listen, if we don't go back with Benjamin, we ain't getting anything. And if we don't go back with Benjamin, Simeon is staying in jail. And dad is just upset with them. He wants nothing to do with this. And he blames them for all his trouble. In Genesis 43, 8 through 9, somebody steps up to the plate, though, and it's Judah. What we saw years earlier, this dude has been changed. This is what happens in the time period when we step into God needing and wanting to do something in us to get us to the place where we need to be, to become the people that God wants us to become. Judah said to his father, send the boy with me and we will be on our way. Otherwise, we will all die of starvation. And not only we, but you and our little ones. Because he realizes, hey, listen, I'll take responsibility, but this famine, this starvation, and this is what happens if we don't act upon desperation the first time, it gets worse. It impacts generations. He even says, hey, Dad, this impacts you, it impacts us right now, and it is going to impact all of our kids in the future. This matters. We've got to do something. We can't sit here and do nothing now. He's the one that's saying, we got to do something. We can't just look at each other. We got to step into this. And he says, I will personally guarantee his safety. You may hold me responsible if I don't bring him back to you. Then let me bear the blame forever. Judah steps up to the plate when he never did before. He was the opposite. God has been working on him and changing him. So they go. They take gifts. They take money to repay Joseph. Joseph receives them and invites them to dinner, which terrifies them because they think there's something going on and he's going to punish them and throw them into prison. They go to his servant, Joseph's servant, and they say, listen, man, when we left, probably, I don't know, weeks, months earlier, we not only had like all the grain we bought, but all the money was back in our packs. And the servant guy goes, hey, listen, don't worry about it. Relax. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have put the treasure into your sacks. They gave Joseph the gifts. They bow down before him again, and we see a 20-year-old dream coming true. When Joseph sees Benjamin for the first time, he can't take it. He goes into his private room and he just weeps and breaks down. And he had invited them to dinner, and here's what's really crazy is the brothers, it's still not clicking. They don't recognize him. Joseph seats them at dinner according to age. And they're like, something is going on here. I'd even say revival is beginning. They eat, they pack up, they go to bed. Meanwhile, Joseph instructs the servant, go, fill up their packs with grain, and here's what I want you to do. He's scheming, and he says, I want you to take my silver cup, my special cup, and I want you to put it and hide it in Benjamin's bag. And so the brothers leave in the morning. They barely get out of the city, and Joseph's people come after them and say, you've stolen from the governor. And they're like, we didn't take anything, man. We brought and gave him gifts. We gave all the money back. We tried to do the right thing. And they say this, whoever you find has the cup, you can kill him. And the rest of us, you can make us your slaves. They are so sure that no one has done anything wrong. And they discover it's Benjamin. Judah again offers himself up to stay as a slave instead of the boy Benjamin and let him return with the brothers to his dad. But Joseph refuses. And here I want to read to you this longer portion in Genesis 45, verses 1 through 15, because it's so powerful on what God is doing, how he's doing it, the uniqueness of it, and the beauty within it. Joseph couldn't stand it any longer. All this has gone on. The boys, the brothers, they're freaked out. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, out, all of you, get everybody out. So he was alone with his brothers, and he told them who he was. I'm your brother. And then he broke down and he wept. I can't even imagine what that would have been like for any of them. Revival is happening. Who we thought was dead is alive. I mean, you see Jesus all over this too, I know. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians could hear him. That is some serious wailing. And word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. I'm Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. And then he says this, please come closer, come. So they came closer. And he said again, I'm Joseph. I'm your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. And right there, he could have said, remember the dreams? I told you. And he could have thrown them into prison and punished them. But look at what he does. But don't be upset. This is revival. This is transformational work. Don't be upset. And don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. And who does he blame? It was God. It was God who sent me here ahead of you. Why? To preserve your lives. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more. And there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God, here he does again, has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt, so come down to me immediately. You can live in the region of Goshen, where you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds and everything you own. I will take care of you. For there are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, you, your household, and all your animals will starve. Then Joseph added, look, you can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that I really am Joseph. Go tell my father of my honored position here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you have seen, and then bring my father here quickly. Weeping with joy, he didn't just stop there. He embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. Joseph kissed each of his brothers. He wept over them. And after that, they began, this is so key. And after that, they began talking freely with him. What was it like to have 22 years of bondage broken? It came with joy, it came with God, it came with weeping, and it came with that element of now, I think there's so much behind that we can talk freely with one another. It's so beautiful. He tells them, it's funny to me, hey, you guys go home and tell Dad, don't quarrel along the way. Fighting, I know you guys. It's been 22 years, but I know how you act. And then we saw earlier, I read it to you, their spirits, Dad's spirit is revived. Something happens on the way, though, before I give you some points for today, on the way back that I think matters in revival as well. Because it's God who elicits that. It's God who does some things. It's God who reminds us of what really matters most. And in chapter 46, Jacob encounters God on his way to Goshen to Egypt in Beersheba. And God reveals these things to him in verses 3 and 4. He says to him, Jacob seems to go out. He's had a dream before. You remember weeks ago we talked about it. And God reminds him, I'm God, the God of your father. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. For there I will make your family into a great nation. Let me remind you, Jacob, of what I promised. Let me refresh your memory in case you forgot in your brokenness. Let me revive your spirit deeper than just someone's alive. You're going to be made into a great nation. I will go with you down to Egypt and I will bring you back again. You will die in Egypt. Isn't this beautiful? But Joseph will be with you to close your eyes. And it's beautiful. And we end where we started. 46, 29 and 30. So Joseph prepared his chariot. He traveled to Goshen to meet his father. When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father. He wept, and he held him for a long time. And then he says, I'm ready to die. I'm ready to die because I have seen your face, and I know that you are still alive. I mean, I could even, that's evangelism right there too. Are you ready to die? Have you seen the face, experienced the life of Jesus? Because he's still alive. That's true revival. So let me talk about that for just a few moments here. You got in your notes a few things that I want to reflect on with you. One is desperation. Here's the definition that I want to throw out to you with desperation. It's something without hope. It's two things, really. It's without hope, feeling lost beyond hope of recovery, and then fearless of danger. You could put desperation in those two categories. Without hope, I'm lost, man, beyond hope of recovery, and also it has to do with this fearlessness of danger. And I would say that in here today, again, statistics online, if you're watching, if you're listening later on, there's a lot of people that are desperate and without hope. Again, it's marriage, it's relationships, it's job, it's your faith. It comes from death of many things. Death that you think and believe is the end. I wonder if you're desperate for something to change. You know, it took these guys, when I look at this story, it took them 2 times. It's me. I thought I was desperate. And I didn't realize that I'm still stuck in some of my old patterns that paralyze me. And God still needs to work on me to get me to the place where I'm willing to make a move and give him authority in my life. A lot of times I wasn't desperate enough because this is what's challenging to me. I was only desperate to get what I wanted. I was not desperate for God. So for marriage, it's like if she would just come home, then everything would be fine. Everything wasn't fine before. It's not going to suddenly be fine now. The best place, at least in my opinion, you challenge me on it, is for a man or woman, however it's working in your relationship, that person to be desperate for life change in their own life. Maybe it's for someone else because of their sin and failure, and you're desperate to help them and love them. But wow, I see this desperation for them happening twice. Without hope, lost beyond hope of recovery. But here's where it switches to me. Like desperation switches that says, I care about life, don't get me wrong. It's not, I want to put myself, maybe it is, now that I'm thinking out loud to you. It's death. I have to be willing to die to myself. Which means that little piece of fearless of danger, I'll do what it takes. I'm scared. I'm horrified. I'm terrified. But I'm desperate for something to change. And so you become fearless instead of afraid. Yeah, fear is part of it, but that fearlessness drives you past it. I think that revival is birthed out of desperation. Maybe not always, but desperate for something to change, desperate for my life to be different. And desperation not dealt with can turn into, we saw it here, starvation. Some of you are starved for being loved. starved in your faith, starved in a relationship, whatever it is. Desperation not dealt with could turn into starvation, but it should motivate me to move. All right. Desperation in your notes can drive you deeper into the pit. Some of you experience that. You give up, you've condemned yourselves. You're like the brothers. Why is God punishing us? And we just don't move, we don't do anything. So you go deeper in the darkness and the hole. You stay at home. Nobody cares. Whatever you say to yourself, desperation can drive you deeper into the pit. Or it can, in God's kingdom, position you within God's greater plans. So in every case, Joseph, Jacob, the brothers, all of them, Pharaoh, they're all being positioned within God's greater plans, and that came out of desperation. What do you do, I wonder, for you? Who do you turn to when you are confronted with a crisis, a desperate piece of life? In this case, famine is being used for the fulfillment of God's purposes and plans. It's getting them to the place God wants them to be, that they seem at times unwilling to go. And it's time for them to stop looking at each other and get moving. Take the next step. You're not going to get totally fixed, but you don't want to remain paralyzed. All right, so when you do that, if you make a move, right, and desperation drives you to the position God's getting you in according to his plans, your next step, and I'll explain this, is sanctification. This is a theological word. I'll put it in different terms in just a second here. But what is sanctification? It's to be set apart as sacred. We say it here all the time. It's on our carts to be formed by Jesus. You're set apart. You're set apart because you're something special to God. A deeper theological piece would be sanctification is the ongoing supernatural work of God to rescue justified sinners from the disease of sin and then to conform them to the image of Jesus, to become Christ-like, to then out of that be empowered to do good works. For us, again, it's to be formed by Jesus. It's a process. We are becoming something. They are in the story. Joseph has been, the brothers have been, Dad has been. All the characters around them are being formed and shaped by God through all this. So here's what I want to tell you to do. When you are desperate, you make a move towards God and you take a step towards formation. All right, men. I'll put it in the terms of man camp. I still say it sounds so cheesy, doesn't it? I'm sticking with it. I'm going to work that thing right over and over again. I'm not naming names. I'm not calling you out. I told you I would not use you as a sermon illustration. I sort of lied, I guess. I'm not doing the name. It's not that. But I do want to say this. I think there's men and women in here, so it's not just about man camp, it's anything. It starts with desperation. Something's got to change. You took a step towards sanctification, formation, even though it was horrifying, because you started here and said, I can't stay the same anymore. This isn't working. You might have had a wife that said, I can't stay the same anymore. This isn't working. You could have made a choice to suck it all into yourself and say it's her fault. But some of you made a choice, or you did this with your faith. You did this with some area of life because you were afraid to step out because of all the brokenness that was paralyzing you. But you said, I'm desperate, so I'm going to move this way, and I'll take a step into the abyss of formation and sanctification. What does that mean? I believe somehow, even if you didn't fully grasp it, wow, I must be somewhat special. And I believe if I do this, God will do his part and do something in me. And I applaud you because that's hard to do. It's not easy. So when these guys in our story finally stop looking inward at one another, they start moving outward towards God, and that's when things begin to change. Is it all fixed? No. It's only just begun. They're going through multiple layers of desperation and brokenness and fear and intimidation and wonder and who put that in my sack? Why do we have this money? What's going on? God did this to us because we're being punished. Oh, there he is. Oh, no. I mean, all this stuff. Always take a step towards formation. So the moment you're desperate, you don't go into a hole, but you move forward into the ways of God and what he wants to do. And I saw the fruit of that around a circle at camp. Guys were like, I don't know, I'm going to risk this. Here's me. Bop. Just threw up in the middle of the circle. I didn't experience guys going, man, we got to clean that up now. It's more like, just tell your story, man. Because God is reviving death. He's resuscitating. Why? Because you're worth it. So the moment if your marriage is broken, but you just step towards formation, even for yourself, it feels selfish at first, but it's important to start there. This is where God can start resuscitating. Or you can just go up in a hole and go into your room and eat a box of donuts after church. That's pretty good sometimes too, though. Don't get me wrong. Always take a step towards formation. All right. Just shameful plug for small groups. Small groups are formation. But I'm scared. You're going to make me say something. Yeah. It may take me a year, but I'm going to keep working you. I believe that you are so important to the kingdom of God and you have a place in God's giant plan that I believe it's important to take a step towards formation. It's hard. I don't like it sometimes. You're going to have to, this is in your notes, examine yourself. But the answer is examine yourself through the lens of God's purposes. Otherwise, you're going to allow condemnation and shame to drive you away. Examine yourself, evaluate yourself according to God's dream and plan. Not concerning punishment. You're going to have to work through trust and forgiveness. I'm sure it was hard. I tend to go with this idea that Joseph is working out forgiving his brothers as it's all happening. He didn't know any of this was going to happen. And suddenly there they are. The 10 guys that sold me into slavery are here right now. Oh, you know what? They don't recognize me. Why didn't he just throw them into prison? Why didn't he just slaughter them right there? Why didn't he pay them back? And it took a couple trips, it seems like, until that last time, all of a sudden, it's just this brokenness comes over him. And he says, that is some maturity that happened in this guy. That is stepping into formation that says, you didn't do this to me. God did this. That is forgiveness. And God deals with that stuff so that it doesn't control our future. For we are becoming someone and a community of family and brothers and sisters. And this matters. We see this in the life of Judah. I won't go into it now, but look at the life of Judah where you see his life just changing right before our eyes after 22 years of just damage done. he turns into the one that becomes more like Jesus. And it is shocking that we didn't see that because he wasn't that before. And that leads to revelation. God is not only revealing these things in us, but he's like what paralyzes us, but he's revealing, then we see in the story who he is, his identity. He says to them, I am this, to Jacob. I will do these things. I am with you. We just see God all over the story. So when we step into that formation, the fear is that it's just going to turn and be all about us. Oh, look it. When I step towards a community of people, a relationship with God, he's just going to start revealing all my junk. Then everybody's going to know all my junk. They're going to condemn me and shame me and all that stuff. And you know what? There's some of that that's going to happen. I hope not the condemning and shaming by any means. That's not healthy and good. But a community of people that says, we believe in you, that you can be better, that you can do great, that you can do well, that you can succeed for God, even in your darkest, deepest place. We believe we can help you. We're not going to condemn you. We believe in Jesus. We believe in what he's done for us. That kind of community, you're stepping into that. So, yep, your junk's coming out because people want to help you. But also, God is then revealing himself. This is who you are. This is how I created you. That does not define you. I am with you. You are this and you will be this. And then one of the things he does in that revelation piece is he is revealing his love for you and desire for relationship. I think God knows, as did Joseph, that we need security and intimacy. So what does he do? He hugs and kisses his brothers. I don't know if I could have done that. I think that's why it took a while to get to a place. And I like this. It's that vulnerability piece. There's some other teaching on it. We talked about it before, about Joseph exposing himself to see that he was Jewish and all this kind of stuff. And then I wanted to refer, like, that's what we do at man's camp. And you're like, if you're tracking with me, then leave it right there. But here's the deal. I love when Joseph says, come here. Come here. There's something about seeing, right, the eyes of somebody, the face of someone, when you feel so condemned. Come here. And what is he saying there? Come close. Come close. I want to weep with you. I want to hug you. I want to kiss you on the cheek. You matter to me. We can make a difference. This is who God said you are. So I am declaring what God says about you in your life. Come close. Come here. Because the other way is to push people away, to drive them away. And then it says I told you this earlier, they talk freely. I saw that at camp, maybe too much. I wondered what he's revealing to you. The last thing is revival, and I'll wrap up. Revival is God's work. Revival is what God does. In all this, we saw that. This is God working. This is God moving. This is God restoring. He restores vision. He restores vision for them, the ability to see what could and should be. We see that from Joseph. For some of us, our vision needs to be restored. Revival needs to happen that way. You've lost your vision. You've lost your dream. You just feel like everything's a dead end, and you're just like, I don't know, I guess this is what I got to do now. And you're 25 or 58. When God revives us, I can now see his dreams again. That brokenness and baggage that kept me hidden away and imprisoned and paralyzed begins to be broken away. Chains begin to be broken off of me. God restores my vision. He restores my relationships when I'm revived. And I already told you, it's with him first. Then he begins to reconcile me with others. And I think that's part of it. It could happen, in different stages. But I really challenge you today that if you're here, the starting place for anything to be revived is you, your heart, your soul, and Jesus, not someone else. It's you. And I thought this was interesting. Worship team can come up. Someone said some form of this somewhere. That one of the things the brothers needed to do was decide if they would submit to the authority of Joseph. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if they remembered the dreams. I don't recall it saying it anywhere. Maybe something will pop up later. But they had to decide, are we going to move forward? Are we going to take a step towards sanctification? Which means, am I going to accept the authority of that young kid who is now the governor of Egypt? And I thought about it for me, for you, for those of us online listening that maybe don't follow Jesus or are struggling. I need to decide if I will follow the authority of Jesus. Will I trust him? Will I take a step towards sanctification, towards formation from him because he loves me and wants the best of me, the best for me? Which leaves me with the last thing, if you would stand with me. Always take a step towards Jesus. Always take a step to Jesus. But Ron, I'm so dark, it's so deep, I'm so broken, everything's falling apart. Why is this all happening to me? Take a step to Jesus. If you're desperate enough, take a step to him. He loves you, he died for you, he takes care of sin, he wants to walk with you, he wants you even, hey, come close. Come close. Come here. Even in your fear, what do you want, Jesus? I just wanted to tell you that I love you. The Bible is filled with that. Jesus is constantly walking around, it seems like. I'll remember that in a couple weeks, walking around Israel, walking down to the old city and remember the time when a woman who had been hurting for years, longer than 20 years, was desperate. No doctors could heal her. Nothing could fix her. And she saw Jesus, but she was so afraid. She thought she'd be condemned if she touched a rabbi. But she thought, if I could just reach out and touch his cloak, everything will be different. She was desperate. So she chose sanctification, formation. I'm going to go there. I don't have anything else to lose. I'm going to risk it all. And she reaches through the crowd. And what was revealed to her, because Jesus paused and stopped and said, who touched me? And the disciples are like, there's thousands of people around you. Who touched you? Everybody touched you. No, somebody needs to come close. Woman, come here. She thought she was going to get yelled at. Come here. And before really she's even healed physically, he just says peace, which spoke much deeper to the things that needed to be healed than, and be healed. Come here. I love you. Go. Be who you were created to be. So we always take a step to Jesus. Father, today, thank you for your love for us, for your greatness, for your formation in our lives because you love us. For some of us, it's taken a long time, and it's going to take a lot longer. It's a process of becoming. A lot of us, we're just in a desperate place. I pray in that you'll reveal the truth of what's going on in their lives, that you'll reveal who you are, what you do, how you do it, and all the beautiful things that go along with that, and that you will continue to call us close, and that we will always take a step towards you. And if there is someone here today that has never surrendered their life to you, I pray that they will realize, it sounds tough, but that they would decide to submit to your authority in their lives. For their old self has been crucified with Christ and is no longer them who live, but it's Christ who lives in them. So as we live in this earthly body, we want to learn to trust you. The Son of God, Jesus, who loves us and gave his life for us. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen.